this CI, this collaborative intelligence of AI and human intelligence has had to exist for us to be able to create a database now of over 4,250 service providers categorized across 45 disciplines, 137 countries, about 1 million data points, except all of this stuff. The amount of human intervention that has been needed has been excessive. Also with things like the ownership models of the holding companies and the big WPP, Omnicom, IPG, Publicis, Havas, etc., those organizations, how all those are structured, we have all that information as well. And a lot of that has been manual and domain, pharmaceutical domain expertise to be able to do it. So we definitely have now a process in place that uses machine learning tools and has created an agent that allows us to do that.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the video podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. In this podcast, we speak to industry leaders who share their ideas, thoughts, and anecdotes from within the logistics world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chain Reaction podcast. As always, we talk about various issues supply chain related. And today I have my guest, Carwyn Jones from Ekarnia. So he is looking to transform the pharma industry and how the supply chains interact with that space. But Carwyn, can you just explain a little bit more how you ended up here? Your career and background is in pharma, working in Eli Lilly and GSK. So how you got to that place where you are, and what is Ekarnia?
Sure. No, thank you. And Michael, great to talk to you today. My career started at Eli Lilly and GSK. So back in direct with pharma companies. And then most recently, I worked with a company called Doctors.net, which is a healthcare professional community, and also as a senior partner at OpenHealth. So I have both sides of the coin, really, with the direct working in pharma and working with a large agency group as OpenHealth. I also run the Pharmaceutical Marketing Society in the UK. That's a not-for-profit organisation focused on advancing standards. So we do a lot of work as well on industry agency relationships, working with procurement and various elements around the sort of supply chain. So that really has led us to the Ekarnia business now over the last 12 months, looking at how pharma and agencies and suppliers, how they work together and collaborate more effectively. So that's kind of the essence of the experience that has built towards the current business. So.
This is very interesting because it's as we talked earlier, it is kind of very close to the ethos of what we are doing at Flux as well. But would be very interesting because I have personally a little experience working with kind of the pharma side of the market. Is what are the specific challenges that you see in supply chains, and more in particular, kind of relationships between the parties within kind of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think, there are a few, okay, but there's the two or three ones that get played out and get spoken to us a lot about is number one is actually working out who is doing good work. So which of the agencies or which of the suppliers that work with these pharma companies, which ones are the good ones? Now, they have things called preferred supplier lists, or PSLs, and they talk about that. But again, they're very poorly managed. So the first issue is actually, how do we know who's doing good work? A lot of that is built on trust, on friendships, on relationships. All of that is fine. But obviously, when the pharma person leaves the business or the agency person leaves the business, that may change. So there's an issue, number one, around just working out which agencies and suppliers are good. The second one, which is also a real challenge for pharma companies, and I'm sure for the businesses that you work with as well, Michael, is around data. Now, pharma companies don't have a data issue from a volume of data. They have a data issue from a data management, from an interoperability, from a kind of understanding where is that information about the master service agreements? What system is that in? Oh, we've got some revenue numbers for these agents. Yes, where's that? So all of this stuff is flying around. And even when you go into more formal metrics like quarterly business reviews or etc., they're slides that sit on a server that no one ever sees again. So again, that sort of data, understanding where the data is, who has access to it, etc., again is another big thing. And probably the final one I'd say is just it's slightly disconnected, but it is a big one for pharma and how they partner with agencies, is also their ability to find new suppliers. There isn't an obvious place to go. There isn't an easy one source of truth to go and find a new supplier that you could actually say, good luck with Google, good luck with ChatGPT, good luck with some of the sponsored websites where you pay to be the top of a ranking or the top of a league table. They're not great. So there isn't an easy place to go when you're thinking. It doesn't happen very, very often, but sometimes there's a niche requirement to find a new supplier and they don't know where to go to find this. So they'd be probably my three. I can go on, Michael. There's more, but they'd be my three. Big ones.
I'm sure there is more, and as always, the devil is in the detail. But there is still, even with those three, is quite a lot of to unpack and address. But a couple of things that you mentioned is quite interesting. Well, firstly, maybe for our audience, if you can also clarify a little bit, and for my understanding as well, is when you mean agency, would that be like a broker in a kind of logistics sense, that an entity, a group of, consultants, let's say, that advise the pharma kind of research and the brand team who could be, generic or contract manufacturing capacity or capability that will actually produce the products that they need?
It's an interesting question because we've debated over the phrase itself. So, is it an agency? Is it a supplier? Is it a service provider? Is it a vendor? Is it a consultancy? It's complicated, right? But for the Ekarnia business, we talk about commercial service providers to pharma. So it is an external business that is providing services to the likes of GSK and AstraZeneca. They might be doing brand communications, medical communications, publications, real world evidence, market access, pricing. We have 45 disciplines in this sector, but they are outsourced. The pharma company outsources the work to those businesses and they deliver websites, scientific content, symposia, conferences, training, learning and development, whatever those things are, and they deliver those directly to the pharmaceutical company.
Okay, I see. And how those relate to the specific, let's say supply chain, a physical supply chain kind of elements where I know a lot of pharma companies, they contract manufacture production of, paracetamols or various derivatives of some of the over-the-counter drugs. Obviously, some of the expensive drugs are typically made in-house, but lots of, generic, more of a consumer good type things are produced by someone, in India, in Asia or somewhere.
Yeah.
So are those also would be the agencies that connect, supply, report, monitor, and so forth?
Yes, they would be. And at the moment, for the Ekarnia platform, they're not part of the platform. So we're in the kind of commercialization space, not necessarily in the R&D or the manufacturing space. We'd love to be, and we hopefully will be soon.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we focused on the commercialization element of the supply
I understand.
chain.
Okay, well, that makes good sense. The interesting points that you mentioned about the data, and I used to repeat, what I've heard from one of the big clients that we had is we have tons of data but not enough information. Is how to get intelligence. There's been a very popular term called data lakes, and sometimes you never know what you can find in those murky waters and whether you're going to find the same thing ever again. It's quite a tricky thing. So how does that ambiguity, sort of lots of data that people swim in with an ability to actually get up to speed with the information that matters and the relationships based on a kind of the more of a human connection, based on which most of some or many of the businesses are actually being conducted?
There's again, I'll give you 2 or 3 live examples of the last 2 or 3 weeks that I've heard. So we work with the service providers, with the agencies as well, and we talk to them about the platform. And what happens a lot is that the pharma companies will say things like, "Oh, I didn't realize that you did brand community. Oh, I didn't realize that you did advertising as well." They don't have that knowledge of even of what the service providers do. So they have a master service agreement. They like the business that they're working with. They outsource to them and then didn't realize that they did PR, didn't realize that they did publications as well. So there's things like that go on all the time from an understanding of that data. There's also this big issue I mentioned earlier, just about performance and empirical metrics of the data. I spoke to a procurement lead last week who said, yes, do you know what? It is a problem because a lot of that is in, colleague X who has worked here for 15 years, and a lot of that is in my colleague's head. And I'm thinking, you are a multi-billion-dollar organization, and you're telling me that significant corporate memory and knowledge management is in the head of a colleague that if they left, that would cause you problems. I mean, you shouldn't be saying that out loud as a multi-billion-dollar organization. That should not be said out loud. So again, there's information with regards to that data. And then the last example I'll give you is the chief procurement officer of a large pharmaceutical company asked the category lead in a procurement in the medical function to find out which of the agencies they worked with a number of suppliers, which of those had the appropriate diversity documentation and certification. And she had to manually go out, contact somebody in each of those service providers, ask her key contact, who then went into the business to find out. And then it took 4 weeks to get all this information. Again, which, if that was effectively stored in a platform, because it's key information on your key suppliers, you would just go to the platform like Ekarnia and you would see, all right, they have, tick, they have diversity and we can contact them, their documentation or certifications. There's lots of anecdotal case study and there's lots of data and referenced sources talking about the billions, probably not billions, but the millions of pounds that is being wasted through inefficiency, all of those things because of this data issue of it not being in one place and not being effectively managed. So it's a challenge,
Yeah. Well, you did mention when we spoke earlier, you did mention that sometimes even the KPI or management or communication reports or quarterly reports are just collecting dust on somebody's server and nobody ever looks at it. So people create it just like going through the motions. And then as soon as it's done, they just move on. So this is the interesting bit. So can you talk and maybe elaborate a bit more in your experience on on two sides of things? So one is, what kind of criteria and the approaches that companies use, especially in the pharma business, to find or select an outsourced service provider? And then once those selected, what are the good practices and what are the existing practices, or how the performance is being measured and monitored?
Okay, again, two big questions. If you start with the criteria, that at the moment, and again, we've talked to or spoken to over 150 procurement executives right across pharma, and pretty much everybody talks about the fact that if they're looking for a new supplier, they probably talk to somebody in the business who's worked there for ages and say, look, we're looking for somebody who gets pricing and reimbursement in the Nordic region. Do you know anyone? So they talk to that literally is the water cooler conversation to go, Michael, you've worked here for ages. Who do you walk to? Or you have lunch with someone and they say, Agency X are rubbish. Agency Y are good at the moment. And this person goes, oh, okay, I'll go and talk to them. So it's all subjective metrics. If that doesn't happen, then they end up either spending days lost on Google or lost on ChatGPT or Gen AI, etc., or they end up paying for quite expensive consultancy reports. There's a company called Zero. There's other. You can go to these people and say, we are looking to understand the market research landscape in South America. Can you run a report for me? So you end up doing that. There is nowhere to go as one source of truth to find these organizations. So that's the first thing. The A and part B to that question is you asked about the criteria. There aren't really any. So there isn't strong criteria. There will be experience. Have they worked in a therapy area that we're in rare disease? Have they worked in rare disease? There'll be elements of that, but there aren't specific criteria. At the moment, it is deeply subjective as to, you'll just hear chat from your friend Michael who will say, Agency X look like they're quite good at the moment. Okay, I'll talk to them. So that is how it's done. And then, that's the first bit. The second bit you asked me about performance criteria. Again, this is difficult. You often have procurement who, when you ask them how is the preferred supply list going, so they may, for example, have, 5 or 6 global suppliers who work across their medical communications for a particular brand, for a particular medicinal product. And if you say to them, how is that going? Probably they'll say quite well, because they haven't heard negative noises or bad noises from those suppliers, right? Now, I'm generalizing horribly with that. That's probably not all of them, but a majority it appears to be okay. Some of them will do, as I said, the quarterly business reviews, and they will run some of the metrics, and they might have a set of KPIs that would differ by project, by preferred supply list, by discipline. It might be different for market research than it is for advertising or for medical communications or for market research. They'll have different criteria, but very rarely, again, is that implemented well. And I can tell you, even if it's implemented, it isn't shared around the business. It isn't easy to find, and no one else in the business could use that learning to go, right, because we've critiqued our market research providers. When Michael now goes into a system, he can see that scoring and see what he thinks about the company's experience with those service providers. That doesn't, you can very rarely see that. So that again is a challenge. So it's this subjectivity that is the real problem. Now, that of course you need that subjectivity. You want someone to say, I've had a good experience, I've had a bad experience, but you need the empirical, you need some kind of empirical scoring and over time as well to be able to go, this organization have worked with us for the last 3 years and their average score from all of the net promoter score ratings, it has been 8.8 out of 10. Whatever, you get my point. Whatever that is, you will have those empirical measures as opposed to having lunch and I say, are they any good? And you say, I don't know. I've never worked with them. Well, of course, that, you're just reliant on some individual's knowledge, so which is a challenge.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
Yeah, what you said is actually also sounds very often, and what I see is where it's not just the kind of the corporate memory; it's an individual's memory. And if the individual left company A and went to company B, they did not just only taken all the information with them; they also taken the processes, the knowledge of processes, and the selection criteria and so forth. So the previous company left with nothing, and the new company immediately adopting new ways of working because it's all in people's heads. But that raises another. Yeah, go ahead, please.
You go. Sorry.
No. I just because I just want to because that leads to almost another difficult question which we are facing, and I'm sure that you are facing in the same way, is the question of trust in the sector and between the partners. And it sounds like there are a variety of challenges with that, especially where a lot of relationships are built around personalities with or mostly without help of the kind of the hard and unbiased data. So how do you, first is how do you work around trust and help a platform that's supposed to provide that foundation for unbiased decision making? How you break sometimes the either conservatism of individuals to adopt that kind of technology?
I think how do we get them to adopt that technology within the business? You mean?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So sometimes people now start to do things differently. They used to do it some way, and they have some certain ideas and the ways of working and so forth. And now they somehow need to rely on something, the data that they haven't necessarily created themselves or provided themselves.
I get what you're saying. So this is valid, and we've spent a lot of time working on this. So we have our first charter client earlier this year was Bayer Pharmaceutical company. And they supported us on some of the development of the platform. And one of the things that is absolutely crucial when you talk about connecting pharma and service providers, there has to be value to both. There's quite a lot of platforms around at the moment where the sole value is to pharma. And it appears to me that it allows them to, I won't say bully, but you know what I mean? It allows them to really leverage and really put pressure on their agencies and their service providers. So with our platform, what's really important is that both groups see value. So pharma see value in that they're collecting this data and they start to have corporate memory and knowledge management around performance, and they share this around, etc. But the agencies also see value in the fact that they have all this information in one place, all about their organization, that they can share, for example, around Bayer. And they can share this information with Bayer saying, look at our case studies, look at the thought, and they use the content on the Ekarnia platform to also promote themselves and organically grow within the business. So what that also means, which again is quite, it's not, I was about to say a smart idea, it's nothing that we've come up with on our own, but what it means is that the platform doesn't have to be used by Bayer solely based on their own initiative. The agencies and their service providers are saying to the people within Bayer and within the clients that we work with, oh, by the way, would you mind endorsing a case study? Or by the way, we've got 2 new credentials on, one in oncology and one in AI. Take a look at it. So they also, there's a kind of a circular, not quite closed loop, but there is a loop that allows the service providers to engage with the pharmaceutical clients and the pharmaceutical clients to do that themselves as well. So we're not just reliant on, because you're right, I can tell you, we all know this, there are probably thousands and thousands of examples of some poor procurement technology that's tried to be implemented and nobody is using it. So again, we obsessed about this to make sure that there was a way that this isn't just, we're going to email 300 people, tell them about a platform and hope they get on with it and use it. So they will get that information, but also they will get their agencies and their service providers engaging with them to say, come onto the platform, look at this, look at that, will you do this? So that again has been an important part of our journey. So
no, very, very interesting. I can totally relate to that. So it also sounds like what we do is a two-sided marketplace. You have both sides, and you can't allow one side to dominate the other. Correct. Because it will never end up well. So it's a building long-term relationships. And what I've also heard is one of the big challenges that you guys are addressing is try to get rid of Excel spreadsheet and PowerPoints. So you can build a foundation which could be used by many, but that comes with the challenge of standardization. So you're working with buyer, and then you go to GSK, and GSK might say, well, we're doing things differently. You need to customize this for us. Well, yeah, but you're using the same agents, and we've collected the same kind of information, and this is how that information being processed, and that's what it looks like. So it's kind of, well, we can offer you a bespoke solution, but you will lose you will lose some of the scalability when and some of the details if you try to avoid or not use some of the standardized elements. So how do you so that obviously becomes a challenge on everybody's side, but do people respond to that well, or do people still kind of very, very conservative in the sense that, well, it needs to be done our way or it's a highway?
I think there's okay, I can talk to you about the review. So the review process and the endorsement process, to be very specific, at the moment is very simple. So again, I can't believe that more people haven't done this kind of stuff, but within the Ekarnia platform, you as a service provider can get your client to endorse you for therapy area, for discipline, and for geography. And that is a thumbs up, a positive intent tick. That then goes onto the platform. Your name is on there. And then someone else from that client company comes in and sees that case study and sees that you've endorsed it or that it's been endorsed and can contact you or can just see the positive nature of that endorsement. So that will be standard. I mean, Pharma won't be, the future clients that work with us won't be changing any of that stuff. As we get more complicated, and I say more sophisticated, then we may look at having certain sort of questionnaires and more complex review processes. But at the moment, again, you'll have to stop me talking because I've become a review bore. My wife doesn't want me ever to talk to anyone about it if we go out for dinner. But because the whole essence of reviews and endorsements, it's quite a challenging situation, look at Amazon, you look at eBay, all this sort of stuff. It's really quite complex. And the other thing that we've also done, which is really quite interesting when it comes to endorsements, is that this information at the moment sits within a private client library. So only the pharmaceutical client sees their own reviews. That isn't made public. When we started this, we thought we'd have a Glassdoor type, everything is out there and everybody sees it. Now, the agency, the service providers didn't want that, and nor did Pharma. We may well aggregate and anonymize as we get more pharmaceutical companies coming on board. So we get to 10 clients, we might then say, look, can we publish this as an aggregated data? But at the moment, it will stay. So it'll stay within this private client library for each of the clients. But so I think there are certain bits of functionality that I can see us moving and losing because it won't be used. And certain pharma companies have come up with ideas, and we actually think it's been quite fun. We actually think that's a good idea. We will make that change because that's not a bad idea. So we can change the functionality will grow and change, but I don't see pharma companies coming in and radically changing certain things within the platform, but we're open to sort of platform improvements, certainly. So.
Well, it's very helpful when clients, from their perspective, come up with very, very interesting ideas. It is more challenging when they come up with tons of restrictions that you have to navigate through, and especially if those restrictions are to the detriment to either your performance or even sometimes to themselves. It's just they're shooting themselves in the feet. Sometimes that happens. But the interesting point I think we also touched upon is, and this is kind of the direction of travel overall, is the technology and how it helps with what we're doing. Because obviously you guys are also, as you said, you're swimming in tons of data. So there's a lot of there's a variety of technological approaches that how you can process the data, how you can extract intelligence from the data. AI pretty much is on everybody's lips these days, but many people are giving it just a lip service rather than having a clarity of exactly what and how they're going to use it. And just before we started, we exchanged a couple of thoughts on AI. So could you maybe elaborate a bit on what you're doing in that space?
Okay, so yes, I mean, clearly AI, well, AI isn't a thing. And by the way, I'm not an expert on AI, so I'm not going to get into too much of the detail and pretend I know what I'm talking about when I don't. But, AI isn't a thing. Machine learning is a thing, and the processes around that are clearly quite interesting. But so what we found, so we also, as part of this partnership and part of the supply chain working with Pharma, we've sourced a database of commercialization service providers, and we've been working on that. If I'd spoken to you last summer, I would have thought we'd have it done in a couple of months, but it was agony and it's been very painful. And we've been teaching, I say teaching an LLM, but we kind of have, and we've been using a retrieval augmented generation and various different models to source the data. But the challenge, the two key challenges are, number one is that the publicly available information out there on these service providers isn't very good. You read corporate websites for these businesses and you think, I don't really know what they do. So that number one is a challenge, that the information just isn't there. And then number two, that the generative AI processes are not strong enough to be able to analyze that information well. So we have had this, again, this kind of this CI, this collaborative intelligence of AI and human intelligence has had to exist for us to be able to create a database now of over 4,250 service providers categorized across 45 disciplines, 137 countries, about 1 million data points, except all of this stuff. The amount of human intervention that has been needed has been excessive. Also with things like the ownership models of the holding companies and the big WPP, Omnicom, IPG, Publicis, Havas, etc. Those organizations, how all of those are structured, we have all that information as well. And a lot of that has been manual and domain, pharmaceutical domain expertise to be able to do it. So we definitely have now a process in place that uses machine learning tools and has created an agent that allows us to do that. But the legwork around it, honestly, last summer I thought this will all be done in a month, and it definitely wasn't. So, it will be interesting to see, because we could, in theory, take the learning that we've done and move into another sector. We could move into automotive and take the learning and the process that we've done to create the same kind of thing. We won't be doing that for a while because we've got enough on our plate, but that was the rationale and the logic. So that could happen.
No, I appreciate, and I know the pain. I felt it, or we feel it still. So we're doing something very, very similar, specifically in logistics space, and that is a painful process. I had a guest on the podcast as well that we talked about AI, and we both agreed that it's not going to replace anybody, or it's not going to it might replace some of the routine tasks,
yes,
but it's not going to replace humans, in the sense that the expertise, the knowledge, the ability to make decisions, the ability to process very, very complex information is still needed to be there, to have the domain expertise that is still critical, without which no AI is going to be able to exist kind of on its own or do things on its own.
It was bad. However, just to give an example, and this is explained, and no wonder the AI couldn't do it. So there were 6 of us in the business, and we took 50 agencies each. Okay. And we said to each person, tell me which discipline these agencies and which these service providers work in. You're looking at the website, you're looking at LinkedIn, you're looking at press releases, and you're going, I think they do pricing. Do they do pricing? I think they do market. Oh, I don't know if they do. And we are experts manually looking at a company and saying, what do they do? So, it's incredibly difficult. So I don't criticize some of the AI tools for it, because it's challenging enough to do it. If you went through each company on your own manually, you wouldn't be able to do it. So it's hard.
Yeah, it is sometimes like you look at, well, it's either on one hand it could be garbage in, garbage out. On the other hand, you could be, which is also a challenge for everybody who communicates, and then the marketing space is like, what is the best way to describe what you do that it clicks and resonates with people? I have the same conversation with our marketing team. If somebody lands on our website, like, what are the milliseconds or half a second that takes them to understand what we do? And if they don't understand, they we're most likely going to lose them, even if they are potentially a very good customer of ours, or with the potential need that we can solve.
I'm not sure our website is great for that as well. So don't. I'm not pointing the finger without pointing at ourselves as well. But yeah.
No, I know, absolutely. But so. I think probably as a last question that I'd like to ask you, kind of on the technological side of things, because you mentioned a couple of things and quite a few things that would be interesting to kind of explore, expand, and work. So what are the technological trends, especially the kind of the emerging technological trends, that will allow you to enhance your service offering, or enhance your delivery capability, or enhance some of the value add that you provide to your clients, that would drive and propel the business forward?
Okay, there's a couple of interesting things here that we will do and we haven't done as yet. I mean, there's basic kind of interoperability and API transfer of information. So that again, as Ekarnia continues to develop and evolve, that is something that we'll do. So we don't need all the information on the Ekarnia platform, but we need that information to be easily accessed via the platform. So that again will be important. That takes, there's a level of IT governance and work that needs to be done to do that. So I think that's certainly a challenge. I think as we move into other areas again around RFP and RFI, we'll move into that sector. So there might be some machine learning tools that we will work with in that space, or even partner with somebody to provide those tools. We're getting asked about that all the time. Please, can you disrupt the RFP, RFI process? And again, that's on our list of things to do. And the other one I think is interesting, because I don't know if you have a view on this, it'd be interesting to see what you think, Michael, but we looked at also login, and we were looking at single sign-on and the complexities of all of this sort of stuff. Yeah. And we've actually looked at the passwordless magic link requirement, and it's quite interesting, because what that means from a security perspective is that anytime you leave a company, you cannot access the next day, you can't access any of this information. So it removes any of the username password stuff. Obviously the single sign on it, that wouldn't apply, you'd have left, but we've also played a lot with that, looking at trying to make the login process as seamless as possible and frictionless as possible, but also as secure as possible, so there are never any issues of anybody taking anything when they shouldn't. So there's quite a few things happening. And again, I had written down here, the last thing I would say as well, which we've obsessed about, is just simple stuff like UX and UI. Make this platform easy to use. I mean, I can't tell you, there are various platforms in procurement that I will mention some of their names, but SAP Ariba and various other platforms that exist out there that are just hard. They're really hard to use. So no, people don't have a good experience. So again, for us, we obsessed about, we explain people how to use the platform in 20 minutes. We have short videos showing you how to use things that are easy. The Ekarnia platform is not complicated. You look at menus and they're well titled. So you click on and that's what I should do there. So that again, I think is so often overlooked as a simple requirement to make something, think about the user and make the experience for them beautiful and easy.
Absolutely. I think historically a lot of software has been developed by engineers for engineers, with not enough consideration for the users who actually use it on a daily basis. So some people being sent to a lot of specific trainings, like with SAPs and so forth, and they get various, black belts and whatever in using of a particular UI, only to discover a completely different platform in a new job, or provider just changes a couple of buttons, a couple of crucial buttons and menu items in their system, from one version to another, and then the whole thing just goes pear-shaped. So that's quite amazing. So thanks very much. That was very, very interesting, Carwyn, to talk to you today. You've raised a lot of very interesting points. I'm sure that our listeners will be and viewers will be very happy to discover, and I'll certainly will look forward to staying in touch, and hopefully Ekarnia is going to have quite an interesting value proposition that we can talk about in a few.
Well, let's pick up. Thank you. I've enjoyed the discussion, Michael. So thank you. And let's maybe chat about Flux, because again, as we said, the essence of the business is very well connected to Ekarnia. So they might come together. So yeah, thank you.
Indeed, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
All right.
We'll speak soon. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have a story or opinions to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to Chain Reaction or visit flox.is for more information. See you next time.